Lindsay, did you say you couldn't swim?
Yes, that was a rule on the mission that you could not swim.
Like in
There's
a
a belief
pool or body like the ocean or just in general, you couldn't go into a body of water?
you couldn't go swimming at all into a body of water because the belief in the Mormon church is that when you're on a mission, or Satan, he strives to tear us down as missionaries because he does not want us to share the truth. And so he has power over the water and he can drown us as missionaries. I mean, so that's a belief.
Wow. That's the
It's
first time
pretty
I'm hearing
extreme.
that.
Yeah.
Trigger warning, this podcast contains mature themes and discussions of cults, manipulation, and trauma. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking, where we expose the dark side of control, manipulation, and the human stories behind them. I'm Anonymous Andrew, executive producer and investigator into cult dynamics and coercive control.
And I'm Melody, a cult survivor and advocate for awareness and healing.
This is Cultimatum. Hello and welcome back to the Cultimatum Podcast, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Anonymous Andrew. And with me tonight is my co-host, Melody. Hello, Melody.
Hello, Andrew. Tonight we're joined by Lindsay, a former and longtime member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. After spending decades inside the system, believing she was the one who was broken, Lindsay is now speaking out on social media, exposing how religious systems can create environments where abuse is enabled and how institutions often protect the abusers rather than the victims. Lindsay is also working towards holding the church legally accountable for the abuse that she says was covered up and mishandled. Today, she is here to share her story and her awakening. Lindsay, welcome to Cultimatum.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here and speak with you guys and get the truth out there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And welcome again, welcome. And we can't wait to hear your story. So dive right in.
Okay, so I was raised in the church. At 8 years old, I was baptized as a member of the LDS church. And I still remember just the amount of brainwashing. At 5 years old, I remember my dad always saying, "What would God do? How would God do this?" I was basically conditioned to not trust myself, but to be obedient because of what God would want me to do. Also, there were a lot of, every Sunday we'd go to church and sing primary songs of going to the temple one day and being a missionary one day. And as a child, we all know that, our brains are very moldable. And at that time, singing songs, I mean, that's another way of conditioning and brainwashing. And we would have family home evening on Mondays where our family would meet and we would talk about Christ. We would have seminary in high school. I would go to seminary at 7 o'clock in the morning and talk about God and principles. And I really wanted to do what God wanted me to do, and I wanted to be obedient. And so I definitely thought I was in the true church. You know, Throughout my life, I struggled with suicidality and hypervigilance and anxiety and depression. And I thought it was me. I thought something was wrong with me. I'd sit in the classroom and you know kids would be learning the ABCs and I'd be scanning the room and looking for exits. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. You know, I went to the hospital, I went to the doctors. I had so many, CAT scans and MRIs. My dad, he was always there sitting beside me, beside the hospital bed, holding my hand. He'd be giving me blessings. And, my parents would always pray for me and they put me on different medications to help me out and to see if maybe these medications could help with my anxiety and depression. And I even went on a mission for a year and a half as as a sister. They call it sister missionary. I served in the Canada Vancouver mission. So you can see how strong I was in the church. And I came back, and after my mission, I remember I was feeling even more suicidal just because, as a missionary, there are so many rules. You can't watch TV, you can't swim, basically to keep you safe and to keep you focused on doing the Lord's work. And so when you come back off a mission, it's really disorienting because you're so focused on God's work, and you come back and all of a sudden you're put into real life where you got to find a job, you got to work, and I wanted basically a better transition because I was sitting in the basement a lot, just depressed and not knowing what to do, feeling completely lost. And
Lindsay, Lindsay, did you say you couldn't swim?
yes, that was a rule on the mission that you could not swim.
Like
There's
in
a
a
belief
pool or body, like the ocean, or just in general, you couldn't go into a body of water?
you couldn't go swimming at all into a body of water because the belief in the Mormon church was is that when you're on a mission, or Satan, he strives to tear us down as missionaries because he does not want us to share the truth. And so he has power over the water, and he can drown us as missionaries. I mean, so that's a belief.
That's
It's
the first
pretty
time I'm hearing
extreme.
that.
Yeah,
I have not heard that
I
one.
have not heard that
I was
one.
almost think I was my next question was gonna be, was this just for females because you couldn't be in a swimming suit? And I'm like, "Oh, no, obviously it's for males and females if it's about drowning."
Yes, for every missionary, the belief is Satan is going to try to tear us down because we've been set apart as a missionary, so we have more, spiritual, the spirit around us more. We have more strength of God within us, and so God is going to try to tear us down more. And so that's why they say that there are these rules to protect us. So I mean, I believe that as a missionary. We couldn't watch TV, we couldn't read magazines. We could only send mail to our family members once a week, because we needed to focus on, the mission. So, yeah, there were many, many rules, and, another sister had to be with me at all times. So I remember there was one sister I didn't really get along with, and I would just go to the bathroom and spend 20 minutes in there just to kinda get away and have some peace. And it was definitely hard because you're with different missionaries, different people at a time that maybe you wouldn't even communicate with in the real world. So that was a learning experience for sure.
About what age are we talking about now
I was 21 years old.
at that time? Okay.
And how far away was your mission? Do you if you don't mind sharing that?
So I was living in Alberta, Canada, and so British Columbia, Canada was just a province over. So it was about 12 hours away
Okay.
12 hours away from.
from Alberta, from where I
From
lived.
her
And
home.
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So let's pick up there. So at 21, you came back from your mission back to Alberta, I'm guessing, and take it from there.
So after my mission, I went to college, and I went into psychology and got a degree in health sciences, specializing in addictions counseling. And I had a passion to be a counselor, to help people. And I developed that passion on my mission because before my mission, I felt like I was super selfish. But on my mission, there were some good things that I did learn on my mission and in the church. I'm not on here to say everything that I, was raised in was all negative. There were some positives in the church. I did learn about on my mission how serving other people can help you, feel love unconditionally. I mean, it went to the extreme of that's what you're doing constantly, talking about God, serving, and there's really no time for yourself except for scripture study in the morning. But that's one thing that I really learned on my mission was service to others and losing yourself and almost gaining yourself at the same time by serving others. So that's why I developed a passion for helping others. And so I went and got my health science degree. At this time, like I've always been best friends with my father. My father and we had a close relationship. We'd fish together, we'd go boating. I would share, everything with my dad. And I never thought twice about him ever hurting me because he was always the one that was my best friend. He was, always there whenever I was struggling.
Quickly, I just want to clarify something. You can't go swimming, but you can go boating and fishing. Two other activities
Yeah,
that
that's when she's not on a mission, though.
Yeah, so it's different when you're on a mission. On a
Oh,
mission, that's different. As a missionary, that's when the Mormon people believe that you have more of God's strength within you because you're set apart as a missionary. So then God works or Satan works
so
harder on
when you
you.
come back home, you can go swimming?
You're released as a missionary and you come back home and
Okay.
then yes.
Okay.
So does that clarify that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That would make sense because if you told me that you couldn't swim even when you were home, but you could boat, that I would have problems with that. But okay,
But you probably couldn't go boating and fishing when you were on your mission.
right, because it
Because you
had
wouldn't be
everything to
focusing
do
on
with
God.
water. Yeah, she'd be surrounded by water. She'd be
Right.
eating food coming from the water. It just wouldn't logically make any sense. But okay, all right, I'm past that. Okay, okay. So you graduated and you got your health degree. You became a what
I was a
letters?
counselor for a couple years, and I realized counseling was not what I wanted to do. At that point, I was living in British Columbia. So after my mission, I lived in Alberta. Then I moved back to British Columbia and finished my degree there and worked for a couple years. After that, I developed chronic pain. I woke up one day and I could not lift my right arm. And I was just, what is going on? I didn't know there was no red flags earlier. I just couldn't lift my right arm. And gradually every day, I started getting pain, like just pins and needles throughout my legs and my arms, my neck. And and a couple months later, I could barely move. I didn't know what was going on. And I had to move back home. I lost my job. I lost the house I lived in because I could barely move. I remember it took me 7 hours one day to drag myself out of bed to go into the kitchen to make myself a sandwich and come back and lay in bed. But my dog, Ruby, like, she's here beside me right now, but she was always beside me and just giving me the unconditional love that I needed. And so I moved to my parents' house for 4 months, and this was in Alberta. And in that time, like I needed love. I needed to feel safe. And I felt from my mom, I felt just a lot of jealousy. And she'd put me down and invalidate me all the time. And my dad, I felt complete lust from him. And I was so confused. I was just, because my dad, he was a bishop. He was always showing, everybody around him, love and serving others. And I didn't know what was going on and why I felt all this lust from my dad. I felt so uncomfortable around him. And one day when I was getting dressed after I had a shower, I walked into the room I was staying at in the basement, and I felt so uncomfortable. And I looked to my right, and on top of a frame, I found a hidden camera. I found a hidden
Oh, no
camera in
way.
in the basement in the room that I was staying in, and I just shattered. I started crying, and shaking. And I'm just like, "What is going on?" Like I couldn't fathom what was going on in that moment. And then it made sense. And I was like, okay, like I've been feeling this lust. And then I'm like, why? I just was so shocked. I put it in the garbage. Like I didn't even think about keeping it for evidence or anything. I just honestly I just wanted to get rid of that. And, and I didn't say anything to my parents other than to my mom. I said, I think dad's attracted to me and I feel really, really uncomfortable.
Lindsay, 2 or 3 times you said the phrase, I felt lust for my dad. And I don't know if
Um,
you were saying from my dad or for my dad. So can you, if you're comfortable diving into that a little bit more, what can you explain exactly what that felt like? You were feeling like he was lusting you, or you felt like there was a sexual tension between the two of you
I felt like there was lust coming from him on his end.
on his end? Okay.
I definitely felt like when I would sit beside him, because I'm an empath. I can feel other people around me and what they feel. I can feel happy, and then all of a sudden somebody can sit beside me and I can feel depressed because they're feeling depressed. Um and so even sitting by my dad, I was just feeling like he was lusting after me. I felt, the ways that he would be looking at me, and you know
And to
one
your
day he put
memory,
his hand
go ahead. On one day, he put his hands.
he put his hand on my hand, and he left it there, and I had to remove it quickly. Um, and, you know, I can't really explain the feeling of lust. So, I mean, I felt that from him. One time my family, we went to
Well,
go camping, and my dad wanted to, he set it up as I would be sleeping next to him, and I said, "I feel more comfortable sleeping by mom." So I changed that, and I slept by mom, and I'm glad I did. I mean, I don't know if anything would have happened. Um,
How old were
but
you at that time when he took you camping?
this was about 6 years ago. This was when I was in chronic pain, and I went to my house to feel love, right? And to, have my
So you were
parents
in your
there.
20s.
So I'm 42. So 6 years
Oh,
ago.
okay. So you were in your 30s at that point.
Did you
Yes.
feel any sexual tension growing up? Because this is a little bit unusual in what we normally hear. We normally hear that children get abused. We're talking about as an adult, the parent is lusting. That's I'm not saying I'm just saying it's unusual that the father would try something as an adult. He would normally a pedophile or a sex abuser grooms their victims very young, and to try to do that in your 30s is just wacky,
It's unusual.
very unusual. Okay, wow.
So
Okay, so how did you keep going? I'm very fascinated.
So basically, after 4 months, I left to Rapid City, South Dakota, because I went to, different doctors and clinics, and I had an MRI and found out that I had 6 bulging discs. And they were happy that I came. They're like, "You're smart to have come to get an MRI," because my family, they didn't know if they should pay for it because it was super expensive. But, I mean, I'm glad that I did because I found out I had 6 bulging discs, and that's why I couldn't, uh, really move. I had 1 in C3, C4, 2 in my mid back, and 2 in my lower back. And that's all central nervous system, so keep that in mind as I keep talking and telling you more. And so none of the doctors could tell me the reason why I had such 6 bulging discs. And so for about 2 years, I had treatment, with chiropractor, traction, and laser at Health Source in Rapid City. And I had a great chiropractor that, you know, I went at the first 6 months, I went almost every day. And, it was really helping me. I was improving. but I was still bothered by what happened with my dad and the lust that I felt coming from my dad towards me. And when my dad and my mom would visit me, I still felt that from him. And I just felt uncomfortable, It was just such a different feeling than when I had when I was younger. Growing up, it was always innocent and fun, and I could trust him. And I started seeing a counselor.
But was it really innocent and fun?
Well, and that's what I'm getting into. So I started seeing a counselor, and I was doing EMDR and DBT, and their approaches are definitely, they're number one in the world for trauma, DBT and
Right.
EMDR treatment. And I started having flashbacks. I started having flashbacks of my dad abusing me at a young age.
Ah,
Oh, so
okay.
this wasn't new. Oh
Mhm.
gosh.
I knew this was coming. I'm sorry. And I'm familiar with EMDR, and I've had it, and it does cause flashbacks. You have to almost relive the trauma over again before you can heal. Was that
Yes.
your experience?
Yes. And I mean, because you were talking about every incident, and, what I was talking about with her was, I'm so confused at why I would feel this, this lust for my father when I felt safe with him. And then so she would, say, talk me into, okay, so, you know, remember a time when you were in your bedroom, or remember a time, we would go back to different specific situations. And I started remembering, because I mean, I have had a bad memory of my childhood. It's really hard for me to remember my childhood. And I think what I did was, I blocked my
You
mind to
blocked it out.
survive at a young age. Like,
Yeah.
how does a
Right.
child survive that, knowing that, like, your parent is somebody that loves you, but it's hurting you at the same time?
Yeah,
It's
that's a
all blocked out.
that's a lot for an adult to absorb, let alone putting a child in that position.
But it's a defense mechanism. It's your
Yes,
subconscious or conscious
protecting you.
protecting you, right?
And so I was able to put the dots together. Like, that's why I struggled with suicidal ideation my entire life. That's why I was depressed. That's why I had anxiety. And, like, I always thought something was wrong with me. Why? And I would sit in the hospital bed just crying. I was in and out of the hospital most of my life. And I was feeling broken. And the whole time realizing now, my dad fractured me. I was never Nothing was ever wrong with me. I was just surviving.
Wow, that had to be a lot to take in. So this was in your late 30s that you figured this out?
I figured this out 6 months ago.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
ugh.
Oh, you are fresh into this.
Yeah, so I'm
Wow.
still going through a lot of trauma. I cry a lot. I do a lot of mindfulness and meditation. That's really helping me. I have a
So
dog.
as of 6 months ago, were you still involved with the church?
No, 6 years ago is when I left the church.
Okay. Okay. We should go back to that and figure out
Yeah.
Okay,
how and why you
Let's
left,
let's
and then
get
we'll catch back up to this.
let's talk about how you exited, and then we'll
okay.
come through your deconstruction.
So, when I was going to school, I also was going through counseling. I've gone through a lot of counseling throughout my life, but at this point, I remember I was pretty suicidal. I was actually at a practicum out of town. So I was in Alberta, but I was in a different city, and I was at a practicum, and I was incredibly suicidal, and I attempted suicide. I overdosed. And I remember the next day I woke up in the hospital. Just to clarify, I have attempted suicide about 7 times in my life, and that was all with
Yes.
overdosing.
Oh,
And,
goodness.
but this time it was pretty bad, and it was the worst it ever was, and none of my family, ever came to the hospital. I had to sit in the hospital by myself and just cry and just still not knowing what was wrong with me. My practicum, I couldn't finish my practicum because, of my state of mind. And the doctor that was sitting by my bed when I woke up, he said, "You know what? I really would like you to get into dialectical behavioral therapy, a group that meets weekly, and I think
DBT.
that you could
Yeah.
really benefit from it." And that was the first time I ever heard about DBT.
I have a question for you, and it's a really difficult question, I think, but I think I know the answer. And you haven't mentioned any of what I'm about to ask you, but I think it's evident. Was at any time in your 18, 19, or even teens, all the way up through your 20s, was there a romance in your life? Did you ever get married? Did you ever have a relationship?
I've had relationships, but I never got married because I believe that, I'm looking for somebody that I truly love, and I've never felt that, with the church. The church really pushes you to get married, go on a mission. For the men, I mean, it was abnormal that I went on a mission, but that was just in my heart. And so I wanted to go on a mission. And so I went on a mission, and there was only 13 sister missionaries and 122 elders on the mission. And that's about normal. Um, and then right after my mission, my bishop was, are you gonna get married now? It's just, they push you. And there's so much, pressure, to be obedient and do what's right. But, I'm kind of a wild child, and I kind of, follow my own internal guide. And I didn't want to do that.
And plus, you were going through this subconscious lust with that you and your father were going through. So maybe that prevented you from seeking romance, do you think?
Well, in my
I
teens
kept
and
you off
after
track.
my mission, like I said, like I was best friends with my dad. I never saw nothing abnormal from my dad. So that's
Okay.
completely separate.
Okay. Very interesting.
So, going back to the DBT, I started DBT, and it it really helped because I was able to find the dialect or find the balance in my life that I could never find before that. Where it was always extreme highs of extreme, I'm such a good person, I'm so good in the church. They have you on this like kind of roller coaster ride of I'm such a sinner, I'm so bad. And then on that high of I'm so good, I'm making all these good decisions. And there's never this middle ground of feeling, you know, sane, feeling balanced. And um that's so unhealthy. To live in extremes in any way is so unhealthy.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and
And
that's
cults
what
like to do that. They like that extreme emotion because that they don't like that moderate and middle of the road feeling because it actually gives them less control over you.
yes, exactly. That's why I felt, out of control my whole life. It's not only the brainwashing in the church, it was not only the sexual abuse, it was as well psychologically. When thinking in extremes, you're going to act in extremes.
Right.
Your thoughts precede your emotions precede your behavior. And that's definitely, as I went along with the DBT, I found that I did develop more control over my life. And, you know, the thing that I learned in dialectical behavioral therapy was radical acceptance. And I have never heard of that. In the Mormon church, you can't radically and completely accept yourself because part of you is a sinner. You're always trying to be better. You're always, oh, I sinned. I have to repent now. And it's that like whole process of going back and forth, keeping you in that loop. And that's how they control you as well. And um and that radical acceptance was the principle that led me to leave the church because I realized that that was a way to love myself, and I never loved myself. I always struggled with love for myself because I was always trying to, make the church happy, make my dad happy, and make the God happy, right?
Right.
So radical acceptance, I learned how to hold myself. I learned how to love myself and sit with myself and work through things with myself. And that control is something that I've never felt before. And the love within me grew. And that's when I realized, this is wrong. The church, they were trying to control me the whole time. And that's when I realized I was in a cult.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Don't go anywhere. More Cultimatum is coming up. Not knowing how we've had a couple of LDS Mormons on, but how do you walk away from that without them coming after you? Did you literally walk away from that? Did you leave your parents?
So I just stopped going to church and I told my family, obviously my parents, they weren't that happy, but they still like supported me and still, showed that they loved me, but I wasn't okay. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would have nightmares that I was going to die because they instill in you that if you leave the church, Satan has complete power over you.
Oh, they
You know what
all
that
do that.
does to you?
Yeah.
Knowing that, oh
Mm.
my gosh, like, I'm gonna get in a car accident, I'm gonna die. Like, I thought I was gonna die because of the fear that they install in you, that now Satan has control over you.
And you don't know any better because that was indoctrinated. That was impressed upon you as a child, right?
Right.
So you
Mhm.
don't know any better than that. You can't think logically or critically think at that stage. So what
Now,
they
Yes.
go ahead.
well, I have a quick question because I know in the Mormon church that in order to get like your name off of their documentation, you have to officially, legally, like by submitting, like I think signed, notarized written requests or something. Did you ever officially leave the church or did you just stop attending?
I stopped attending. I haven't officially left, but that's what I plan to do.
Okay.
Okay. So and that was about I think you said about 6 years ago?
That was 6 years ago.
Okay. I'd like to get into your deconstruction. We have some time for that. So, as you left, what was that like? I can only imagine.
So like I said, I was definitely paranoid. My anxiety increased. Definitely thought I was gonna die every day. Um, when I started drinking coffee, I felt guilty because I never drank coffee before that. That's another, you know,
Big
law
no
in the
no.
church. You don't drink coffee. Caffeine is not good for you. All I can say is that I was glad that I was in a counseling degree because, I was able to use the counseling approaches on myself that I was learning about. Because, in times of depression and anxiety and um feelings that like I'm gonna go to hell, and I was able to ground myself with mindfulness and meditation, but people that didn't have those that don't have those tools, like, I can't even imagine. Some people don't even survive that.
I suspect you subconsciously went into that field because you knew you needed those tools.
And now for sure, I definitely see that wisdom, but when I was younger, I definitely didn't. I was like, "Oh, after my mission, that's what I love to do is helping people," and at that time, I was very naive about the idea, but now there's definitely wisdom in that.
Yeah, yeah. In hindsight, you can see those things. A lot of times, it's so subconscious when it's happening. You don't see it for what it is.
Yeah, I definitely think that even my dog, she's saved my life. I can't even speak more highly of my dog. Because I mean, she gives you that unconditional love that I truly never ever had. And I look back and I don't think my parents or my siblings, they didn't know how to love themselves. And they were just still deep in the conditioning.
Right,
And how can my parents love me if they don't love themselves? And
right.
I had to learn that over the past, 6 months.
Well,
Why would my father do that? He was struggling, like, 'cause in the Mormon church, there's so many strict laws, like, don't look at pornography, don't masturbate, don't, just the sexual, you know, factor
Repression.
is it's so strict.
And
And so
yet
I believe
I believe that the elders or the men are drinking and they're watching porn. And what was the
mhm,
other thing they couldn't do besides drinking?
masturbate.
No, there
Mm.
was something else before the drinking. I asked you if they could drink, and
Oh,
then
the coffee?
the coffee.
Coffee.
I can't. I can picture like some of these elders. They have a little clubhouse somewhere where they're all drinking their scotch, and because they can get away with it because they're in the higher up echelons. So, um, but
They
they
create this illusion. They create
right.
this illusion that they're the perfect father and that they're doing their best in the Melchizedek and the priesthood and, in their callings and as the bishop but then a lot of them have a double life but on the side, they get to do whatever they want. And
Hmm.
we're seeing that even in society today, the illusions that are being uncovered, you know?
But
So
but you can't have a cup of coffee. Even if you're
Mhm.
out, you can't have a cup of coffee because you feel guilty.
Right.
It's almost like Melody's story. When she got out, she couldn't work a day job on a Saturday because she felt as if she was going to go to hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna go to hell. I drank a coffee.
Right.
I was
Yep.
Yeah, no,
immoral
that's
with the
so
guy,
wrong.
and I
God,
thought I was
that's
gonna
so
go to hell,
So
and I was waiting for me to get hit by a car.
so I assume then when you broke from the church that must have done some damage to your relationship with your parents and your siblings?
Yes, definitely. My two older sisters who are still strongly in the church. My two younger siblings, my brother and sister, they actually left the church. So we actually got a little bit closer, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, my
Hey,
definitely my relationship with my two sisters, we're not as
Lindsay,
close.
I want to ask you a very tough question, and if you don't know the answer, you can just say I don't know, and if you don't want to answer, you can say I don't want to answer. But you mentioned siblings, so your father had this thing for you. Do you know if he went after any of your sisters?
I don't. Um, I told my mom and my younger sister throughout my life, I always felt like my dad was attracted to me. I guess in my teenage years and my 20s, like, I did say that a couple times to my sister and my mom, but they kind of, like, brushed it off, like, I remember talking to my mom, I said, "I think dad's attracted to me, and I'm really uncomfortable," and she would just be like, "Oh, no, 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 your dad's a great man." So, like, I was always invalidated or just pushed away with, like, my
Of
thoughts on
course.
that.
She's the obedient wife. She's not gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
She's
and
playing
it's
her
just
cult
so
role.
unfair with,
Mhm.
the genders you know, in the church because the men, they're looked at as perfect and that they have the priesthood, God's power, right? But then the woman, they become submissive and be obedient to the man, which they have no idea that their husband is living a double life and they have to live by these standards that their husband doesn't even abide by. Like, it's so unfair.
Mhm.
And that's why there's so
Okay.
many women that are so suicidal and depressed. I mean, I know a lot of
Oh,
women that are still in the church that feel that way.
yeah, and I'm assuming then too that is why, because we're gonna jump back ahead to your story where you were saying that you were in the hospital for another suicide attempt, and your family didn't come see you. It's because you were already your I'm assuming this is why, because your relationship with them was already damaged because you had already left the church.
Yes. And my parents, my mom and dad were on a mission at that time. And they felt like their duty to look after the missionaries there and doing God's work was more important than flying home to see their daughter in pain in the hospital.
Mm,
That's what they chose.
ugh, that had to be hard. And how long ago was that?
That was about 7 years ago.
Okay. Okay, so it's a little bit further in your past then. So, wow.
Okay. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. We do have a few minutes. We got maybe about 10 minutes left. Do we want to jump ahead to where you are today? Or
Sure.
is there anything that you want to fill, any more gaps you want to fill in between when you left and today?
Um, I just want to say that when I found this out about my father, I did approach him,
Really?
and yeah, that video is actually on my social media. Um, I recorded him and I approached him about it, and obviously he denied it. Um, but do you know what he said? He said the first thing I said was, "Dad, did you ever touch me as a child?" And he said, not that I can remember."
Uh, huh,
What does that say, right? Like, if he never actually did, he'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like, why would you say that?" But
Right.
that was his response.
Yeah, that's an unusual
not that I can
answer.
remember is a what's that in the court of law? They call it no. If you get, you're not guilty, but you're not innocent, but there's no contest. You're not contesting
Right.
the right. So he's
The
not
allegation.
contesting. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
also
He's not
it's
contesting the
also
allegation.
a form of manipulation, keeping you confused. That's what
Mm-hmm.
he's always done. That's why
Mhm.
I've been so confused about my past, is because he always gives me that middle ground, never straight answer, like run around kinda answer, right?
Right.
Um,
'Cause
so and
it seems
I
like if he hadn't, he would have said, "Absolutely not. Why would you say that?"
right.
That would be the answer, I think, of somebody who was innocent of that accusation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have definitely come out on social media about, yes, me confronting him, also about me finding the video, the camera in my room. Um, and I have not talked to my family for about 6 months. So I cut them all out. My sisters, my mom they've always been psychologically abusive, um, very emotional abusive. So I would actually cut out my sisters and my mom before I cut out my dad. So it kind of just played out that way.
Wow. Wow,
So,
and
you know,
do you still have a relationship with your 2 younger siblings?
um, no, I don't talk to my family, not even my younger siblings.
Wow. Wow, that's hard.
Yeah, I've done this all alone. And through counseling and through, my knowledge of counseling and I have to do mindfulness. I have to exercise mindfulness and meditation daily, um, for me to slow down my central nervous system. And going back to my chronic pain, why did I all of a sudden at 36 years old develop chronic pain? I believe, everything that somebody goes through emotionally, psychologically, physically, comes back to them somatically in the future. And I definitely think that that's what happened and that's how I developed chronic pain. Because I was healthy my entire life other than that. And, I'm getting better. I'm not 100%, but I'm choosing myself now.
Well,
I'm
you've
listening to
distanced
myself.
yourself from your family, so yeah, you're gonna start to feel better.
I feel like a totally different person. I
Good
feel
for you.
happy. I mean, yes, it's sad, but at the same
It
time, like,
hurts.
I'm not
Yes,
being, like, pushed around like I'm not a punch bag. What's the word? I'm not a doormat. A
Yeah,
punching bag, yes.
yes. Well, and you've removed yourself from several different toxic, unhealthy dynamics.
dynamics. Yep.
Yes. So I would definitely say at this point, I am moving forward with, wanting the church to be held accountable for this. My dad was a bishop when this abuse started, and because he was a leader in the church, then obviously he was, you know, somebody to look up to in the church. But if he was doing that, I mean, he needs to take accountability for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they need to be held accountable.
I
Absolutely.
feel like the Mormon Church, they have been sued many times over sexually abused cases. I know over the last few years, there's been hundreds of abuse cases. I am trying to get survivors together and, I want to come at this as not just myself, but, you know, with 20, 30, 40 women and, saying the church needs to take accountability for this because this cannot keep going on. And I mean, this has been going on for years.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. If somebody is listening right now and they were abused within the Mormon church, how could they find you and get a hold of you to become part of this lawsuit? And I'm assuming this would be a Canadian lawsuit.
Okay, before she answers that, I did Google it real quickly. In 2023, there was a $1 billion verdict. A California jury awarded 2.28 billion dollars in damage to a woman who was sexually abused by her stepfather at the church functions of the Latter-day Saints. All right, and then it goes on, and then there was another one in 2025. So I was right. There have been several major $2.2 billion. Lindsay, put this thing together. Put this thing together.
They can, oh crap, scratch this. I'm just trying to think of where they can, because there's my name is not on here, right? I mean, I can give my email, but do I want my email to be out there?
Well, your TikTok account is all about this, no?
Yeah, my TikTok account would be fine.
All right. What I would suggest is creating a Gmail account if you don't already have one and make that dedicated. You can make it anonymous, doesn't have to have your full name, but you could put down Latter-day Saints suit or lawsuit at gmail.com and then use that to publicly put that out there. And they can contact you that way without you having to give all of your information until you're ready, until you hire a lawyer and you're ready to move forward with that. Because, yes, you don't wanna put your name out there until you're ready.
Yeah, I can share my TikTok, account, and then I can also, can make up a Gmail account specifically for, the cause, and then I'll put that in my TikTok so that people can get a hold of me that way too. So I should get that to you.
Okay. Alright, we are running out of time. We have 2 questions that we'd like to ask you. Is there anything else you wanna say before we begin to wrap up?
I would just like people out there that are thinking about leaving a cult, or are ready to leave, to listen to themselves, to start listening. What is your body telling you? You know, because I spent years just trying to be so obedient to my father and obedient to God. But really, it was, a man-made church. It wasn't God. That was just manipulation to get me to be obedient. So I think the best advice I have is to really start listening to your body, to your intuition, because that will lead you to the truth.
Was that Melody's question? Yeah, okay. 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 Lindsay, so you mentioned several times that when you were younger and you were very much into, I think you said Jesus, and you went on these missions and you were very devout to the church all the way in through your 20s, I believe, correct?
Mhm.
And it wasn't until your 30s that you began to doubt and you left and you are now out and you're deconstructing. Where is your faith today?
After leaving, I have not attended another church. I'm not religious. I would say I am very spiritual. So I believe that there is a God, and I still pray to him every day. And I know that he just wants me to be happy. And by choosing myself every day and loving myself every day, that is me choosing myself. And that's as far as I go with spirituality. I
Oh,
just
that
think
was a
God
great
wants us to
answer.
be happy, just choose ourselves, and that'll help us gain our power back, our control over our lives, and you know it enables us to finally listen to ourselves.
And you're still in your deconstruction process. You're still healing physically. You're still healing mentally, and
Mhm.
you're still young. You're still in your mid to upper 30s, I think. You did
42.
say your age.
42.
You did cross 40, right? Okay. So, but that's still, but oh God, I was 42 again. That's still young. So you have another half a lifetime to reconstruct your life, and
Uh-huh.
hopefully you'll find.
Yes, one thing that I forgot to say, maybe you guys can edit this, was about my mom when I did approach her about how I felt like my dad was attracted to me when I was staying with them that 4 months. When I did that, she completely took her love away from me. She, like, was distant with me. I think that's another huge betrayal that just adds more to the trauma that I'm going through, because she
Yeah.
chose
Well,
my dad's side and I was just left
well,
abandoned.
we did kind of go over that because we spoke about your mom being what was the word I used? The obedient wife. Thank you. I was looking
Obedient
at
wife.
she was being the obedient Latter-day Saint wife, and no matter what, in any cult, if anybody comes up to the wife or the husband or whatever, they're going to defend their husband or wife. And this is something that we found that creeped me out. That if a daughter, if I was a mom, and I'm not, so it's hard to really imagine this, but if I was a mom and my child came to me and said, "Daddy's doing this to me, this and this and this," I'd go beat the shit out of him. Seriously. But a lot of moms looked the other way and just said, "But your dad is an elder and your dad knows right," or whatever it was. And it's horrible that the mothers would do that. So,
And that's why I say I don't think they love themselves. I don't think that they even know what love is. They're
no.
just so conditioned.
Lindsay, what an incredible, again, another wonderful told story. Not a wonderful story, but the way you presented it, and I'm glad you're on the other side of it. I'm glad you're on the healing side and slowly getting there. And I can only wish you the best. Should you either get that lawsuit going or get I usually ask a guest this too. Do you think you have a book in you? Do you think you could write a book about this experience?
I'm in the middle of writing one.
There you go. So that's where it leads me to my final thought is that whether you get the lawsuit up and going or the book published, come back. We'd love to hear from you and we'll promote the book. Okay, deal?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank
It-
you so much for having me.
our pleasure. Absolutely. All right.
Bye.
And once again, we want to thank Lindsay so much for coming on the show and being so vulnerable and sharing such a really personal, hard story to share. But she did an amazing job. And I hope her story helps somebody out there that's listening.
Yeah, and I really so for the folks at home, was her first podcast, I think she said,
Yes, she did say
and
that.
just gonna share a little bit that she was just a little bit nervous at the beginning, but she did a great job at telling her story. Um, and I like the way that she left the father. She dropped the bomb about the father at like she like I knew it was coming, and not
Yeah.
because she told you or me, but
No,
no father starts diddling his girlfriend,
adult.
adult daughter at 30. So there
Right.
had to be prior something going on, but she
Right.
finally figured it out through EMDR, which I'm familiar with because I went through
Right.
that. I've had that done, and you relive the trauma, and
Yes.
you do have flashbacks. As a matter of fact, they make you do it. They as you're doing the therapy, you watch a dot on a screen and it goes back and
Yep.
forth, and they tell you to go back to that time and relive it.
Yeah.
And they want you to verbally say it out loud what you're seeing. It's horrible
Yeah.
because you live it again, and
Yeah.
this Lindsay had to live it again, and
Yeah.
but you
That would
can't
be
get
hard.
yeah you can't get over it until you go through this whole thing. So, Lindsay, great job tonight. Really
Yes.
did a great
Yes.
job.
And the other thing I'm going to touch on just briefly is I did want to say, or that kind of went past that part 2-4, but she was talking about, and she highlighted some of the positive things that she did feel that she got through her church. And I do think it is important to acknowledge that to some degree, because in general, those good things or the positive things are a lot of the reasons that we as survivors stay in the cults. Just like, like your bad relationship, Andrew, there were good parts to it. And that's
Oh,
why
yeah.
you stayed as long as you
Mhm.
did, because not every part of it was bad. So those good parts and the good and the positive things that we get out of that are a lot of the reason that a lot of us stay as long as we do, because there are positive parts. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I appreciated that she brought that up. So once again, thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming on the show. And you did an amazing job, especially for it being your first podcast. So you did a wonderful job.
She really did, and can't wait for that book.
As always, thank you for listening to Cultimatum. We truly appreciate your support as we work to expose the truth and highlight the voices of these survivors.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify. It helps more people discover the podcast, creating a greater awareness. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep tuning in to our latest episodes.
You can also follow Cultimatum on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for extra content and updates.
And be sure to join our Facebook community, Cultimatum Podcast, where we continue the conversations and keep you posted when new episodes drop.
And if you're a cult survivor looking for additional support and connection, we invite you to join the Facebook group, Cult Escape and Healing.
You can also find more information about the show, including our full legal disclaimer, on our websites at cultimatumpodcast.com or anonymousandrewpodcaststudios.com.
And if you have a story related to cults or human trafficking that you'd like to share, you can reach us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by using the link in the show notes called Buy Us a Cup of Coffee. Your support helps cover production costs and allows us to keep bringing these important stories to light.
And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you are not alone.